Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new video of Fox Flicks on Popcross Studios. Today, we're gonna be looking at his walk as he creates a horror movie verse of Super Mario. Well, not a horror movie verse, just a horror verse of, well, Mario. Well, yeah, I guess I could have just said horror style. Let's just shut up and watch.
The new Dungeons and Dragons movie is absolutely incredible. That's Monday's video, sorry. The new Super Mario Brothers movie comes out this week, and at the time of recording, I haven't yet seen it, so time will still have to tell if it will reach the lofty standards set for it by the classic live-action version from the 90s, but I figured since we're getting a fun, animated, and
Yeah, I think it will definitely overcome the live-action Mario of the past, considering they did not set the ball really that high.
fully faithful adaptation of the characters this week, I would also give people something to the contrary, redesigning and rewriting the characters from the Mario universe to fit them into a horror story. I think this is going to be an interesting twist, so let's try it out, shall we? Let's go!
Oh,
Hit
horror
like
story
if you
Mario,
want.
that's what I could have
Subscribe
said.
if you feel like. But either way,
Let's move.
enjoy the show.
Mario's feet
Begin.
sloshed into the putrid waters of the sewer, and the stench would have been enough to make an average man vomit. But the distracted plumber was unfazed, as his mind was still reeling from another in a long string of encounters that was making him question his self-worth. The client he and his brother Luigi were working for had called them in for the third time in a week to fix her toilets, and each time they got them working, she'd have them on the phone again a few hours later to say they'd stopped working once more.
Jeez.
While cleaning, they'd found some odd traces of fungus that seemed to be growing back at an alarming rate in her pipes.
Ooh.
The chemicals they'd poured through her system should have killed them off, but there they were once again when the plumbers returned. The agitated woman called Mario and her brother useless excuses for plumbers, and the insults were just mounted on top of those slung at Mario a month earlier by his ex-girlfriend, Pauline.
Oh,
In breaking
damn
up
it.
with him, she'd said all manner of horrible things to him, calling him an irresponsible slob who was going nowhere in life, even stooping to say that despite being 25 years old, he looked like a 40-year-old man because of his mustache and growing potbelly. He'd been deeply disheartened by this ever since.
Okay, now that's not really an insult. That's more of just calling someone out by the looks, and honestly, that can be understandable. Though if he had shaved the mustache, he would have looked even older at that point.
Despite his brother Luigi's attempts to encourage him and remind him that deep down Mario knew that none of that was true. He was co-running a successful plumbing business, so he was clearly responsible. He loved his mustache, so he shouldn't care what anyone else thought of it. And sure, his belly was growing a bit, but he was still a very strong guy, who could even break a brick with his bare hands as a fun party trick. Unfortunately, none of
Okay, now that would actually sounds like something that would be really cool. Like someone throws a brick at him and he just punches it mid-air and it shatters. Someone animate that if you can. I'd love to see it.
Luigi's encouraging words sunk as deep as Pauline's had cut him. For the time being, Mario just tried to focus on the problem at hand. But now finding he was even failing at being a plumber, something he knew he was very good at, was all the more disheartening. Luigi dropped down into the sewer next to him, also unfazed by the smell but immediately anxious from the darkness. They'd thought that potentially the fungus in this woman's pipes was growing up from some source in the sewers.
Makes
and quickly
sense.
they spotted evidence of the stuff all over the place. Mario shone a flashlight along the walls, getting a look at hundreds of mushrooms and vines slinking through the sewer system. It was a very unusual sight, but before Mario could say anything about it, his brother anxiously patted on his shoulder, saying, "What is that?" Mario turned and saw in the darkness a set of glinting lights that looked like eyes, but they were too high off the ground to be rats and too low to be a normal person. Mario quickly shone his light
It's a
over, and as
toad.
soon as he did, the glints were gone. But there was a bend around a corner right where they had been. Let's just get out of here," Luigi stammered, but Mario just rolled his eyes at his brother and marched towards the bend. He was going to
listen to
prove that
Luigi.
nothing was there. But as he got closer, he heard a quiet whispering sound. Or he thought he did, but as soon as he focused to listen to what it said, it stopped. His instincts encouraged him to slow down, but he kept on pace so as to not frighten Luigi even more. He figured it was just his mind playing tricks on him anyway.
What was
He got to
that?
the corner and very briefly heard the whispers again. His heart had started to thud, enough that he could hear it beating in his ears, but he still stepped forward and peered his head around the corner, to see nothing but more sewers. He took a deep breath of foul, thick air, but was no
It's on the
more
roof.
calmed when he heard, "Mario, help!" He whipped around to see that Luigi was gone. He ran down the sewer towards where the call had come from and got close to a tunnel that was lit in purple light. He darted into it to see a large pipe, inside of which was a glowing purple ring. Through it was what appeared to be a forest and mountains, from which fungus was
What?
growing through into the sewers. He stopped to stare in confusion only for a brief moment when he heard Luigi call for him again, from the other side of the portal. Without any further
Oh, no.
hesitation, Mario ran through the portal and immediately tripped on a jutting vine. He fell and rolled down and down a mushroom-coated hill. He tried to regain footing and stop, but before he could, his head bashed against a rock. His eyes blurred, then went black. The last thing he heard was his brother desperately calling for him again, along with the sound of thundering footsteps. Mario was unsure how long he lay there unconscious, but when he awoke, it was night, and once more he saw a pair of glinting eyes, this time hovering inches from his face.
Oh god. And that just made Toad even more terrifying than the way MatPat made them years ago. God. Next.
Mario instinctively thrust his hands up and shoved
Oh,
the
now we're gonna get Mario himself. Yeah, okay.
figure away before sliding himself backwards along the ground. His head throbbed, but he searched frantically for his light, to no avail. He must have lost it in the fall. He next tried to find anything he could use as a weapon, but as he did, the figure said,
Please, young master, don't fear us.
the figure's high,
My god, what the hell kind of voice is that? Oh my god.
raspy voice was unsettling, but the words young and master both caught Mario's attention.
Please tell me, are you the one we seek?
Mario
this, a
heard the
Kamek?
whispers once more and noticed that in the forest all around him were more of the leering eyes, standing 3 feet off the ground and covered in fungus and mushrooms, like the figure before him.
Please, we, the people of the toadstools, have opened
Oh, it's a toad. It's a toad that's calling him young master. Okay, so the toad looks horrifying, but it's not a monster. That's good at least.
a gateway to your world to seek a prophesized savior, who will finally slay the monster that ravages our lands and has taken our precious princess.
Mario suddenly remembered the footsteps he'd heard as he was falling unconscious and asked if that was the monster and if it had taken his brother away.
Yes, the other who came through the portal from your world to our own was promptly taken by the demonic king, who wishes to keep our lands for his own.
Mario
Yeah.
thought it odd to hear that Luigi had just come through the portal. He was much more timid than curious. Why would he have stepped through some mysterious gateway in the sewer unprompted?
You got me there.
But it didn't matter. Mario quickly asked which way to find his brother and this princess, and the whispers became louder and more eager.
We truly appreciate your noble bravery, but please, let us help you first.
The figure conversing with him suddenly scurried off into a nearby cave. Mario thought he was supposed to follow at first, but soon after the figure emerged, carrying a dirty sack, from which he pulled a red and white mushroom. It hurried closer and closer to Mario, and he thought the being was just intending to show it to him, but the figure came right up to Mario and shoved the mushroom into his mouth. Mario
Oh.
tried to spit it out, but the figure
Oh, that's what happened. And he was holding it out and just went like, oh, that's something.
wrapped a mold-covered hand over his mouth and nose.
Do not fight the mushroom, young master. Feel the power of the fungal kingdom coursing through you.
The mushroom
Oh, God.
tasted awful, and the being had a shockingly strong grip. Mario was unable to rip his mouth free before swallowing. All the veins and muscles in his body tensed and pulsed. A strange rush shot through him. His head suddenly stopped hurting, and his clothes felt oddly tighter, as if he'd just suddenly gotten a bit bigger. The creature finally let go of Mario, and he wanted to be
The power of the mushroom.
angry, but he did feel surprisingly good. The figure then opened the bag and handed it to him.
Now you will be able to use the flora of the fungal kingdom to your advantage.
The fire flowers.
Consume these to aid in defeating the beast. Though I recommend not eating the yellow mushroom well inside the castle.
Inside
Yeah,
the
that makes
bag were
sense.
various flower heads and leaves and other mushrooms. The wafting air from the bag was foul, which was a surprising thought for Mario to have, as he could march through a sewer unfazed. Mario thanked the still unsettling figure and marched off in the direction of a castle that he could just barely make out in the distance. They claimed this was where
For anyone that doesn't understand, in the Mario games, there's what's known as the Mega Mushroom, which is a yellow mushroom that when eaten, when acquired, will turn Mario into a giant.
the monster resided, where it had taken their princess and likely taken Luigi. But as Mario walked away, he couldn't help but feel that something was still off about this whole ordeal. He could practically feel a menacing grin stamping his back as he marched off into the dark woods.
Bowser.
He spent the entire night walking, trying all he could to ignore his exhaustion, and trying to hold off eating any of the strange flora in his bag. Especially when the morning approached
Flora?
and he happened
Fauna?
to scratch at his back and feel something growing. He swatted at it as if it may be a spider or bug, but it didn't fall free. He tore his shirt back and looked over his shoulder to see a piece of fungus growing out of his back. Had
Oh,
it
no.
come from the thing he'd been forced to eat? He was about ready to try tearing it off when he heard something in the forest ahead. It was the unmistakable sound of footsteps, but smaller than the ones he'd heard from the beast. Mario was about to duck behind a tree to hide when a snapping turtle on its hind legs as big as himself thudded into view. It stopped ever
A
so
Koopa.
briefly when it looked over at him, but then stomped towards him, groaning, "Turn back."
God, this is horrifyingly perfect. Yes. What you doing next? Koopa?
Ticket to Madison, you
I
said?
mean, technically, that is a Koopa. It's the king of Koopas. And we're back with the king of the Koopas.
Mario stumbled backwards and tripped, thudding against a tree. The turtle fell towards him and grabbed Mario, digging its claws through his shirt into his skin. He barely held it off him as it again said, "Turn back." Mario rolled it off him and leapt up, about to run when he saw more creatures stumbling through the woods towards him. Some looking like this turtle and some like brown, drooling heads with legs. He didn't seem to have any
should
choice.
have
He
talking
ripped open
mushrooms.
his bag and grabbed out
Goombas.
the first thing he saw. A flower that seemed to be glowing orange. It smelt like burnt mold, but if it could help him in any way, he needed it. He chomped down on the flower and forced himself not to vomit as a bitter, charred, and yet incredibly spicy taste assaulted his mouth. His veins suddenly started to burn, with heat coursing down to his hands.
Ooh.
He thought for a moment that his arms may start to melt when his palms lit up in flames. He didn't know what to do with this until one of the creatures lumbered towards him again. He thrust his hand out forward, and the flame burst from his palm and hit the creature like a rocket, sending it flying backwards.
Fireball.
He sprinted ahead, onward towards the castle, shooting the flames back at any of the creatures that got too close. Eventually, they all faded into the distance, and he was able to slow down, though their calls still echoed through his mind. Turn back. He didn't know why they'd said it, but he couldn't heed the warning. He had to get his brother. His exhaustion was starting to sink in, and with time to think, he also remembered the issue emerging from his
You know what? If he has seen, the the game theory video, that could literally be like the entire basis of this whole creepy Mario verse. Bowser's not an evil man. He's just someone trying to save the world from these parasitic mushroom beasts.
back. He scratched at it again, and he could swear that it had gotten bigger. Or was it just his imagination? Was he being paranoid? Had eating a second item from the bag made it worse? Luckily, the flames were still sticking around as an ability that he could turn on and off with thought alone, so maybe he wouldn't have to eat any more of the plants. He continued his trek, getting more and more tired. By the time the sun was rising, he was within 15 minutes' walk of the castle. He considered stopping for a rest, but had no idea what that beast could be doing to Luigi. He forced himself to press on, despite his eyes threatening to flutter shut. He reached the decrepit castle and was surprised to find that the gateway was open. He marched cautiously over a bridge across a moat of bubbling lava. The castle was vast and wide, with tall halls and corridors, as if built for a monster far larger than a human to travel through.
Yeah.
It was also nearly empty. None of the creatures like Mario had faced in the forest were in there. He considered calling out for Luigi, but resisted the urge, knowing there could still be...
Does anyone else see how he kind of did the horns almost like the biohazard symbol? Like, if you know the symbol, you know what I'm talking about.
anything hiding around the corners. He finally got near the castle center, and it opened up to a massive lava-filled room. There were wooden bridges headed to the center, where there was an enclosed column that looked to have within it a spiral staircase headed up to the top of the castle. Mario was about to march forward when a voice echoed through the room.
Help me, my bravest warrior.
Was that the princess the Toadstool people had mentioned? And if
Yes.
so, was she referring to him? Could she have known he was coming somehow? He started across the bridge when he heard a rumbling growl quake through the room. A spike...
Like, I kind of like what he did for the gauntlets on his arms. He just made them black marks with weird claw fang things just sticking out. Not a bad idea. I actually like that.
tail suddenly swung from behind the center column. A familiar footstep stomped around the bend, then another and another, until finally a 20-foot-tall beast thundered onto the other side of the bridge. It was like a colossal turtle with spikes jutting from all across its body. It had rows of teeth splitting from its lips and gums, and crimson eyes that were rolled back into its head, as if it were a mindless monstrosity. It let out a bellowing roar that was nearly enough to push Mario back, when suddenly the creature's cry turned into a plume of flame spouting from its mouth, blasting across the bridge towards Mario.
Awesome.
He thought he may be immune to the flames thanks to his new abilities, but he dove aside just in case, and was glad he did. The flames scorched across his legs as he dodged and seared his flesh. He cried out in pain, and his agony echoed through the chamber. The beast stomped closer and closer. Mario had no idea what he could possibly do against this thing. He felt as helpless as Pauline had claimed him to be. He thought this may very well be his end, when he suddenly heard the familiar call of Luigi.
Mario, is that you? Please, help me.
It seemed to be coming from above, and hearing his brother's voice was all he needed to give Mario
Someone
another
gagged
surge
him.
of energy. And he quickly got an idea. He saw that the beast's flames were quickly burning through the wooden bridge beneath them. He leapt up and shot more of his own fire at the wood as the monster approached. The blasts erupted into the bridge, cracking and burning away more pieces. The bridge was already starting to tremble when Mario looked up at the beast and shot flames right at its head.
Ooh.
It hissed viciously, but the fire seemed to do little more than irritate it. Luckily, that was all Mario needed it to do. The monster finally reeled back its head, and Mario saw flames swirling in its mouth. Mario ignored all the fear that was coursing through him, and he sprinted straight towards the creature. It breathed a cannon of flame right down at the bridge at its feet as Mario dove beneath its legs, just barely missing the blast. The beam of fire exploded right through the bridge, and the whole thing shattered. Pieces broke beneath Mario's feet as he scrambled to the edge and leapt, just barely grabbing the brick ledge of the room's center. The bridge fell away, and the beast splashed down into the thick magma below. It shrieked out in agony as its flesh was seared away, and it sank into the bubbling mess.
Oh, God. Horror is like this guy's talent. No, just everything this guy does is amazing.
Mario didn't waste any time celebrating. He called up to his brother, to no response, and ignoring his exhaustion, he ran up the stairs. He went up and noticed as he did there was a growing stench, like that of the bag he carried, but somehow amplified even more. He still ignored it and kept running up until he emerged into a dark, windowless room covered in mushrooms and fungus and vines. In its center, barely visible as he was covered in moldy foliage, was Luigi, with a vine now wrapped around his mouth.
Oh no.
Mario ran towards him, suddenly feeling even more so the fungus growing on his own back. When he was feet away from his brother, he suddenly noticed Luigi's desperate eyes were looking past Mario in terror. Mario started to spin around when a freezing wind shot across his ankles. When he tried to take his next step, he realized his legs had been frozen to the ground. He looked behind him to see a pink-clad figure covered in mold and mushrooms skipping up behind him. She stuck her black and blue...
Wait, does Princess Peach actually have ice magic? Hold on, we're going to take a small break and I'm going to look this up. Just looked her up, turns out she has aerokinesis and hydrokinesis, so she could technically make a freezing wind. So, let's go on.
Blue eyes far too close to him, and a foul odor swirled from her farther into Mario's nose. She grinned eerily as she said, "You actually did it? You defeated my bravest warrior?" She marched around him, eyeing him up and down as Mario realized she hadn't been referring to him when she'd called to her warrior. She'd meant the beast. As she looked him all over, her grin turned into a scowl. "Impossible!" She suddenly shot flames at his feet, burning his legs further but also melting the ice. She then shoved him back to the ground and froze his arms and legs in place. "You are a feeble little man and look nothing like the brave warrior I need to help ensure my infection can spread. You must have bested my beautiful Bowser by accident. I've lured you here for nothing, but perhaps I can still make you into something more." She grabbed his bag and leapt onto him. She wrenched open his mouth and shoved one mushroom and flower after another in. He choked and gagged, trying to spit them out, but she forced his mouth shut. "Eat up. You're unworthy of my army now, but with a bit more power, perhaps you can be a pawn in my conquest."
Oh, come on.
Mario could feel the mold on his back growing and spreading as more of the plants slipped down his throat. But they seemed to do more than just that. He felt a tail spawn from his back, part of his body coated over in gold and another in ice. Strangely though, something struck Mario more so than the mutations bursting from him. This woman's words had hit him as if they were once more being said by Pauline, saying that he was unworthy and trying to make him feel pathetic, but this time he knew within himself that they weren't true. Everything he'd just gone through coursed through his mind. He'd just chased his brother into a new world to save him and taken everything in stride. He'd marched all night, fought creatures in the forest, and even just killed some sort of massive dragon turtle beast, all while fighting through his own fear and exhaustion. Nobody could convince him that that wasn't impressive.
He
didn't care what this disfigured maniac thought of his worth, or even any more what Pauline thought of him. All that mattered was what he thought of himself. With invigorated confidence, he lit up his arms in flames to melt away the ice that restrained him, and shoved his flaming hands into this woman's face. He shot the flames forward, and she flew off him with her head smoldering. He ran over to Luigi and started tearing away plants and vines to free him. He barely got anything loose, though, when a flame seared Mario's back. He cried out and rolled across the ground, dousing the fire, as the woman stomped towards him, with half her face burnt and peeling away.
Oh, God.
"You are nothing to the Queen of the Toadstools. I will find a true champion more powerful than you and Bowser, and when this world is mine, we will come for yours next, you pathetic little man."
He shot flames at her, but she ducked around them. He tried his other abilities he'd gained from the plants, even trying to swat his tail at her, but she avoided all and reached him, grabbed him by the throat, burning his neck as she did, and hurled him across the room. He landed down next to his near-empty bag. He didn't know what else could be left in it, but maybe there was something. And when he opened it, he saw that all that remained was the yellow mushroom. The one he'd been told not to eat inside the castle, though he now realized that fungal little gremlin had lied to him about many other things.
At Merrick, this
come on. Now is not the time for an ad. And we're back. Let's go.
Taking the chance at something growing wrong and even more fungus growing from him, Mario chomped into the mushroom, which had a mega foul stench compared to the others, and quickly, his entire body grew. He got over 5 times his size and his head thudded against the brick ceiling.
Ow.
He looked down at the livid, moldy queen and said, "Who's little now?" He splatted his hand down, smushing her into the floor. With a massive hand, he tore the rest of the vines free from his brother and scooped him up. He then turned to the brick wall and raised his hand. He'd never broken more than 1 brick at a time before, but he'd also never been this big. He swung his hand and smashed through the brick wall, revealing the bright sunlight outside. He clambered down the side of the castle and ran back through the forest towards home. After a few minutes of running, though, he had to drop Luigi as he shrunk back down to his normal size. Still, they ran and ran together and eventually made it to the portal, leapt through, emerged from the sewers, and were finally home. They were both
Thank God.
exhausted and confused and in serious need of bottles and bottles of antifungal cream. But in spite of everything,
Yeah.
Mario came out of the whole experience with a far higher level of self-worth. No matter what Pauline or his clients or even a gnarly mushroom princess thought of him, Mario knew he was a pretty super guy.
You could say he was a Super Mario. Oh.
He was a pretty super guy. I apologize to lactose intolerant people for the abundance of cheese in that last line, but you can all deal with it. I'll admit this probably turned out a little bit more like a kind of creepy adventure story than an outright horror story,
Yeah.
but I'm still pretty happy with it. Enough so to do a full video episode of the Design Notes podcast about how I came up with the story and the art for it. That'll be part of my weekly Patreon
Cool.
exclusive podcast series, coming out on Wednesday next week, and there's plenty of other benefits to being a member of the Popcross Studios Patreon. But speaking of that, I will actually be doing another free video episode of the Design Notes podcast for everyone next week on Wednesday as well, focusing on my My Hero Academia Maximum Venom series, and talking
Ooh.
about situations where you should and maybe sometimes shouldn't lean into the things that you're already good at as an artist. But anyway, if you enjoyed this and want more horror stories, I've done a few different episodes turning things like Hollow Knight into a horror story and Hello Boss
Classic.
into a horror story,
Classic.
and I am open to doing more, and potentially a sequel to this. I do have some ideas, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. Besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave people with today is essentially the lesson from this story, that you don't need anyone else to believe in you as long as you believe in you.
He's
What
right.
you say about yourself to yourself is far more important than what anyone else says about you. I hope
That's
that's
right.
inspiring. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the Dungeons & Dragons Monsters as Marvel Superheroes episode on Monday. Goodbye.
And folks, that's where we're going to be ending off today's video. I hope you all enjoyed this. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link will be in the description, and I'll see all you folks next time when we flick on. Peace out.